Bob, and good afternoon, everyone. There's a lot of interesting things that we could talk about this afternoon, but one of the interesting things that I will share with you is that when we deal with money management, sometimes it's kind of personal. If you attend prayer meeting, frequently people will tell you about physical problems they have, or, I'm going for a checkup, or I'm going to have surgery, or whatever. But hardly ever does anybody say, I'm about to file for bankruptcy. It's very, very private. So it really doesn't matter when we look out and see everybody smiling on Sabbath, but I hope that what we say is very helpful to you. I will also say that raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you, and it might be most appropriate when we're talking on that particular topic. But we're going to see something interesting. I'll just tell you, we'll talk in just a few minutes about student loans. I had a lady that was 70 years old come to my office, and she said that she wanted help paying off her student loan. And the student loan was $40,000 still. And what had happened is that she had decided midlife in her mid-career to get a master's degree in social work, and she was going to change careers and become a social worker. And she found the student loan that she would get that would pay for her tuition and living expenses. And she got the degree but didn't find a job, and she was actually working as an administrative assistant. But the interesting part is she still owed the student loan. You see what I'm saying? She really will not live long enough to pay it off, and that's the real bad thing. So we'll get into that a little bit too. I think it's appropriate that we begin with the prayer, and let's just do that to start with. Heavenly Father, we thank you today for the Sabbath and for the blessings it provides us. We want to follow in your steps in this teaching today. We pray that you bless us as we study and as we work together. May our hearts and minds be open to the understanding of your word. May you give us the power to be successful in following the principles. In Jesus' name, amen. I always start with this one little statement. It should be our highest aim in life to get ready for heaven. I'm going to just tell you guys something that's very, very personal to me, but I'll just tell you. I had the opportunity with our son Andrew to climb Mount Whitney when Andrew was 6 years old, and I was probably in my 30s, late 30s. We flew to California and climbed with Holden Crooks, the experienced mountain climber lady. We went up with NBC News crew and climbed the highest mountain in the continental United States. I've had the opportunity of actually flying the left seat of a plane. That's where the pilot sits. And I passed the FAA ground school. I've had some books printed at the Review and Herald, a number of probably 8 or 9 books. I'm going to tell you something interesting. You may never climb Mount Whitney. You may never fly an airplane. You may never write a book. But if you make it to heaven, your life is a success. There's no question about that. On the other hand, all these other things I've done, if I miss heaven, my life is a failure. And so that's why I keep telling you, it should be our highest aim in life, not to get rich, but to be ready for heaven. So that's why this is Manuscript Releases, Volume 5, 255. Now, the reason I start in on this is because you might get sleepy mid-afternoon, and I don't want that to happen. Budgeting is about as interesting to most people as going on a diet. It's not interesting at all. So I'm going to show you a simple budget that we can do this in about 5 minutes. But just some budgeting suggestions. How much is enough? This is an interesting question because the average family will spend everything they make no matter how much it is. Is this true? I talked with an old attorney one time, and he told me, when I graduated from law school, I was clerking for a judge, and we were making about, I don't know, $400 a month or something. Ruth and I spent everything we made. And this was many years ago, but he says last year he made a big figure, and he says, we spent all that too. So the whole point is you need to figure out how to manage your affairs, and that's what a budget is. And if you don't have a budget, you'll never have enough. A budget is simply counting the cost. How much do you have coming in? How much will go out? For those of you that have the workbook, we're on page 17. I'm try to stay with that so I can help you if you need to fill out things. Very important. And so what does Timothy 6 say? Godliness with, what's the next word? Contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, but certainly carried nothing out. So having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. So now we're going to, Luke 4:14 talks about sitting down first and counting the cost to see if you have enough money to do it. And by the way, it's very interesting. How many of you have ever been to the Dominican Republic? Will anybody raise their hands? I love that place. I've been down there a couple times on mission trips. And one of the things that really impressed me was when you get out of the airport and drive into a town, there used to be, at least maybe it still is, there was a lot of buildings that appeared to be started, but they weren't finished. They're just like 2 courses a block and have rebar sticking up and so on. Well, the idea is that it was somebody's dream that didn't get finished. The whole point of what we're talking about, if you don't have a plan to finish it, it's all good to start it. Somebody can go on. But I'll tell you another thing. In the United States, we have this mortgage business that we'll talk about right after the break, and you'll find it to be very, very interesting. But I want to tell you that in some places in the world, I have a friend who now is one of the vice presidents of the General Conference, Pardon Mwanza's his name, born and raised in Zambia in Africa. And in Africa, in Zambia, they do not have home mortgages. So if you're going to build a house, guess how you do it? As you get the money. So you first pour the slab, and then you start the blocks, and then you put the windows in, and put the roof on, and all that. It might take you the same amount of time as it takes you to pay off your house, but at least there's never any debt on it. Pretty interesting. So when he came to America, he said, could I go with you to one of my seminars? And, oh, sure. He said, I've never heard of what a mortgage is like and what it does. Another thing I learned from this guy, we're traveling one day. When I travel a little more casual. And so I typically don't wear a tie. I'm wearing a tie right now because, first of all, we're in church, and I believe I'm honoring God and representing Him. And, you know, this is quite a privilege, as you can imagine. But at any rate, on this trip, we were flying up to Connecticut, I believe, from Washington, D.C. We're sitting at Dulles Airport, and the ticket agent came over and said to Pardon, this guy, and he's dressed in a suit and tie and white shirt and everything, would you mind being moved up to first class? You know, we're both in the coach C section. He looked at me and he said to her, well, he and I are traveling together, so if you could put us both up there, we'll do it. They did. Then he said, why did you ask me first? Guess why? You have a suit on. Isn't that interesting? We thought you were a businessman, so that's where he got bumped up to. So there's sometimes advantages. That's about the only advantage I can think of. We probably won't wear ties in heaven, but nonetheless. Okay. So you count the cost. That's important. We're going to look at the budget in a few minutes. What's the proper use of the money? And where does the money go? I talked with a couple one time, and they said, well, we make lots of money, but we just don't know where it goes. And so I teased them a little bit, and I said, do you think somebody's stealing from you? No, guess what's happening? They're not keeping track of it, so they're spending. Now, you can get on the other side of that. I remember one time talking with a couple. I'm telling you this illustration to make a point. When you get married, you become one. Does everybody understand that part? And the idea is, I've talked to people that said, well, my wife's driving a nice car because that's what she can afford, and I have this little, junker thing because that's all I can afford. They had never merged their money. That's incredible to me. Because I get the idea that trust is based on something very, very important. And I'll just tell you that for 46 years that Kathy and I have been married, she has been the money manager in our house, but both of us have earned money over the years, and it all goes into the same pot, same checking account. She writes all the checks. I write about one check a year, maybe not even that much. I don't think the bank even recognizes my signature. And I'll just tell you that she's a good manager, so whoever's the best manager should be the one that does it. You understand how that goes, okay? Where does the money go? We're going to look at now, this is answering proper use of the money, number 3 there on page 17. Here's the answer. Money has great value because it can do great good, but money is of no more value than sand. Only is this put to use in providing for the necessities of life, in blessing others, and advancing the cause of Christ. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that's very, very important here. Here's the story. What 2 things can you do to store up treasures in heaven? You guys have been here last night and this morning, so you should probably know the answer to this. There's 2 things you can do to store up treasures in heaven. What are they? Helping others and helping advance the cause of God. Now, you see they're listed up here. This is very interesting. Blessing others and helping advance the cause of God. But what comes first? Always, and Ellen White talks about this, she puts our needs first. So if I'm in debt my whole life and it takes all of my income just to keep my own nose above water, how much am I helping others and helping advance the cause of God? Or making it another way, how much am I storing up in heaven? Now see, the interesting part about it, I mentioned to you earlier this big book, Faith and Finance. It's available at the Adventist Book Centers. And I wrote this book, it's only $13. Looks like a $21 book, doesn't it? But I'm just telling you, that's all it is. Did somebody say yes? I want to tell you the truth. Several Adventist Book Center managers have said to me, how on earth can you sell this book for this price? They would like to ask more for it. And the bottom line is, I donated it to the Adventist Church. So I'm not making even 1 cent on any sale of the books. Because I want people to understand this material, and I want you guys to be able to hear the words, well done, when Jesus comes back. That's the real bottom line. But here, in this one statement, it shows that if I can limit my necessities to the point where I can help others and help advance the cause of God, I'm storing up treasures in heaven. And the reason I mentioned that is in the last chapter of this book called The Rewards of Faithfulness. It's very incredible. The stuff I found out is almost sinful. Here it is. Believe it or not, every one of us has an account in heaven. And when we store up treasures in heaven, God is adding to it, at Ellen White says, a tremendous rate of interest. And it will be given to us when we get to heaven. Most people don't even know that. It almost seems selfish and greedy to think about it, so we just kind of minimize it. But that's absolutely true. That's why one of the reasons why this one is so important. Okay, now we're going to look at this. This is really, really boring. But except I'm going to try to make it interesting, and we're only going to look at it for a few minutes. This is so out of date, it should have been updated a long time ago. So don't worry about the big income guys making $30,000 a year. By the way, if you live in Montgomery County, Maryland, this is below the poverty level. So what do I want you to see? I want you to see two things. That is, first of all, percentages. And the second one is what your present income is. Now please, nobody write on this page, because you're going to mess it up if you did. The best thing to do is, we're not going to crunch any numbers today, we're just going to tell you how to do it. So what the best thing to do would be to photocopy this at work and make yourself several copies so you can actually crunch a number. And then you put it in there. But the thing I want to see you is, let's look under the 30,000 income. You have it on, what page is it in your book? 18. Okay. And there it is, page 18. So what you're going to look at is that there's 12% for tithe. How much is tithe? 10%. So why did I put 12 there? Tithe and offerings. So here's the interesting part. The next one is incredible. It's 21% for taxes. Now that's on the low tax bracket. Listen to this one now. I was at a workers' meeting teaching pastors. And I'll just tell you where it was. It was a Glacier View Ranch in Colorado for the Rocky Mountain Conference. I was teaching the pastors. And we had a break and we was going to lunch. And I don't eavesdrop on people, but I'm right behind this guy. He's right in front of me and he's telling another young pastor, I just read this real interesting book that I figured out that the Internal Revenue Service really isn't entitled to get your income tax every year. This is voluntary. You guys have read these kind of books before, you've heard about it. And there's no real mandate that you have to do it. And I decided I'm stopping denying income tax. And I leaned up to these guys and I said to them, please understand I was not eavesdropping. You're talking loud enough for me to hear. And I just want to tell you something. These guys had their heads right up beside me. So I said, you guys are pastors. Don't ever mention that to anybody again as long as you live. Then I said to them, have you ever heard of Al Capone? Who spent the last 6 years of his life in Alcatraz. By today's standards, he would be a mass murderer. Evidence is quite clear that he was responsible for the death of at least 53 people. Why did he spend 6 years in Alcatraz? Tax evasion. So the whole bottom line is, whether you like it or not, as a citizen of America, you have the privilege and responsibility of helping the government function. They don't always do it like we'd like. But what did Jesus say? Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, the God the things that are God's. Does everybody have that part clear? So what you want to understand is, you want to minimize your tax consequences by using legitimate deductions, but not tax evasion. Does everybody understand that? Very important. Okay, so we're going to go on down here. After you take off your tithe and offerings and your taxes, oh, by the way, someone asked me during the break, should we tithe on the gross or the net? I didn't mention that because that's typically up to the individual. About 60% of Adventists tithe on the gross and net. I was with Larry Burkett one time when he was on the radio and taking him a call-in show, and a lady called in from California. We're at the Gainesville office, Gainesville, Georgia, and she said, should we tithe on the gross or the net? And Larry was always real kind to people, but he was a little bit humorous, and he said to her, would you like a net blessing or a gross blessing? The real bottom line is this. Both the Old Testament and the New Testament tell us that we should put God in what position? First. Proverbs 3 verse 9, honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first part of all your income. And then what's the New Testament? Matthew 6:33. Who wrote that part of the Bible? Who's speaking there? If you have a red letter edition, what color is it? In red. Jesus is speaking in the Sermon on the Mount. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, And all these things will be added to you. Food, clothing, shelter, all the stuff we just discussed. So I get from that if we put God first, even above the government, He's going to bless us. Does that make sense to people? So that's why we do it. Okay. So I just want to tell you that. Now, once you take tithe offering and your taxes off, that's 33%. So that gives you 67% of your income. And that's your net spendable income. That's what your budget is based on. And so we talk about 30% for housing, 50% for food. Oh, by the way, I should tell you this. If you eat out at a restaurant, one meal a day, it will double your food budget. I've actually counted, and by the way, so eating out would be a treat, right? Not something regular. So I'll just tell you, I counseled with a couple. They had 3 children, and they ate out all 3 meals. Breakfast, McDonald's, dinner, Taco Bell, supper, Pizza Hut or something like that. You can imagine their food budget, like $600 a month, but most people are paying $200. Just incredible. So remember, it's more expensive, even if it's cheap. And even if it's fat. Okay. We're going down. Auto 17%, insurance is on. The bottom line is very interesting. We even have savings in here. Should you be saving if you're in debt? What do you think? Yes. The reason is you want to have a cushion for emergencies, and that's what we're talking about here. So if you want to know how to do it, that's the next page. Remember to photocopy these, you can do them on Sunday. But remember, let me go back to the other one just real quickly. You put your percentages down there, and then you're going to be able to see what's best for you. So the thing to do is to put down what you're spending right now, what percentage that is of your income, and then you're going to know what areas you're over, what a typical budget would be. And that's the point that I want you to see. This will tell you how to do it. For example, in the housing area, that would include your mortgage or your rent, your insurance, your taxes, your utilities, and telephone maintenance and so on. And in the automobile area, it's not just your payments, but also gas and oil, insurance, license, registration, taxes, maintenance and repair, and replacement. That would be saving up to pay cash for your next car. By the way, car dealers do not want you to pay cash for your car. Is this true? Yes. It is absolutely true. I can tell you, you can go to almost any car dealership in the United States with no money at all. If you have a job, you can drive away with a brand new car. Is this true? Yes. And you'll overrun it, and it's worth it for the rest of your time. Very, very interesting. So Kathy and I made it a policy to pay cash for our cars. And we've done the last 3 cars, but every one of them have wanted us to finance them. And they'll say, well, if you do it for 2 years, it's this, 3 years for this, and then on and on and on. And by the way, what's the benefit of 0%? Who benefits from that? The dealer. Try saying, I want the 0% plan, and then try to get a discount on the car. They get the money up front. You see what I'm saying? It's not really to your benefit. So I like bankers just like I like attorneys, and I like car dealers, and so on. They're nice people. We hope they get to heaven, but I'll just tell you another one. What time is it when you make the last payment on your car? Time to get a new one, right? Typically, that's what they want to have happen anyway. But you want to recognize this. I'm just going to tell you a little bit of personal stuff here. If you drive your car 10 years ago, it will pay for itself twice. Kathy and I had a Toyota Avalon that we bought in 1995. It was the first year they did, 95, I think. Anyway, we had it for 13 years, or maybe longer. Anyway, we had 236,000 miles on it. And we decided that in retirement we'd buy a new car. Guess what kind we got? Same thing, Toyota Avalon, because it gave us such good mileage. All we did was a couple of little things to it the whole time we had it. The point I'm trying to make here, the longer you can drive your car, the better you take care of it, the better it will be for you. It'll help you to last longer and so on. So we're going to go on here. Christian education is very important, counting the cost from year at a time. Somebody was telling me how much it cost to go through the dental school at Loma Linda during the break. Most of our schools, even Adventist schools, $20,000 to $25,000 a year to go through school. So you understand, you go to 4 years to get a degree, it could cost you $100,000. My guess is there's some place in North Carolina where you can buy a brand new house for that. Believe it's true? I know it is in Nebraska and Kansas. It's just incredible. So what would it profit a man though if he gave the whole world and lost his soul? Remember that our children belong to God, and the ultimate goal, of course, is for ourselves and our children to be ready. So I'm going to talk to you about student loans in just a minute. Not right here when we get over to education. But I'm not really deaf on student loans, but I will tell you about when to get one. How do you finance education? Student initiative, students working. I just remember something interesting. When our kids would come home from college in the summer, what is the last thing you do before you go home for the summer? Cram for exams. And that means all-nighters sometimes, especially if you haven't studied too much through the school term. And when you get home, you just kind of let down. And kids will tell their parents, we've been working so hard at school, we just kind of like to chill this summer, kind of hang out at the pool with our friends and so on. And how do you get your kids to work? Oh man, I have something fun to show you here. Why would you never co-sign for anyone? Because the Bible says you should never do it. You know what the Bible also says? He who does not work does not eat. Is this true? And so our kids just love to eat, so we told them, when you're home in the summer, you can spend your money any way you want to. Food or music or clothes or CDs or whatever. M3, well, I don't even know all these numbers. Anyway, after you've saved $1,000. Well, then they're going to save $1,000 every summer toward their tuition. Now, does that little bit help? Sure. Plus you work in the summer. So they ask, how do you get your kids to work? It's motivation. Oh, and I'll tell you another thing. I told you they had to work at Taco Bell. Melissa worked at Burger King. We wondered when we had our children or let our children work at these fast food places, what would that do to their vegetarianism? God is my witness, they're both vegans. I'm serious, really. So, Andrew would bring chicken strips home from Taco Bell to give to her dog, and she would bury them. But I don't know if you've ever done this before, but if you've ever worked making fries, French fries, if you're not real careful, hot oil will splash you on the arm, and it'll go right through your skin. You only have to do that a couple of times to realize you don't want to do that the rest of your life. All the work is honorable. Does everybody understand that? I really believe that. But the difference between working at McDonald's and living in a mobile home is an education. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And by the way, please don't believe I'm denigrating mobile homes. My family lived in a mobile home almost the whole time I was growing up. In fact, for 6 years, our family lived in a 28-foot travel trailer, mother and dad and 4 boys. We were not on vacation. That was our house. You understand? So I'm just telling you, it's a difference, your education, what it makes. So we're looking here, parental assistance. So I'm just going to make it real simple. I believe parents' primary goal is to make their kids independent adults. And the way they do that is to provide them an education. I believe parents owe their children an education. They should work as well, their kids. But then we talk about family sacrifice, prudent living, and grants and scholarships. Now, grants and scholarships are important because if you qualify for them, you don't have to pay them back. And we'll talk about how to do that. Okay, we're going to the next session on page 21. And this one is very interesting to me because it's talking about helping children. It's an awesome responsibility to raise children. How many children should a family have? So I have 3 brothers, and there's 4 boys in my family. Kathy and I have 2 children. I saw something on the internet the other day that if you don't have 1 or 2 children, you're not reproducing enough people to make America grow. Have you heard of that? The bottom line is somebody gave the proper answer just a minute ago. The children that we bring into this world are our responsibility, food, clothing, and shelter for them, so we should not bring into more children in this world than we can afford to take care of. Does that make sense? And to educate and all of that. By the way, what does Proverbs, or Deuteronomy 6 and 7 say? Let's look at it here. Very interesting. This is the second one on page 21. First of all, since you have your books and some of you are writing it in there, bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. And Moses wrote to the Israelites just before he left, or laid down and died on Mount Nebo. These words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. And you shall talk of them 4 different times a day. When you what? Sit down in your house. when you walk with them in the way, when you lie down at night, and when you rise early in the morning. So morning to evening worship, at mealtime, when you're walking with them in the daytime, talk to your kids about money. Teach them. That's important. Okay. Now, we also recognize this one we looked at earlier, the property of God. Psalm 24, verse 1, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and the world and all who dwell in it. So do we and our children belong to God? God allows us to manage for them. So we're going to talk about starting early. And Proverbs 22, verse 6, train up a child in the way she go, when he's old, he will not depart from it. What's the very next verse? Well, verse 7. What does it say? The rich rule over the poor, the borrower is the slave of the lender. By the way, the book of Proverbs is a book of wisdom compared to foolishness. Because this book is wisdom. Well, Solomon is known by the Bible itself as the wisest man who ever lived. Is this right? Under inspiration of God. Would it be wonderful to read the book of Proverbs then? You understand how it is. You're getting God's wisdom. So here's what we're told in Child Guidance, page 133. Let every youth and every child be taught, not merely to solve imaginary problems. What are imaginary problems? That's just things you would find in a math book, for example. Do all the problems on page 10. This is your assignment for tomorrow. These are imaginary problems. You know, what if you had this number and you took this one away from it and multiplied it with that? That's the idea. But let them not be merely solve imaginary problems, but let them keep an accurate account of his own income and outgoes. Let him learn the right use of money. How? By using it. Now, before I go to the next part of this, how many of you ever heard the idea of kids getting an allowance? Do you understand what the term allowance is? Like, just because you're part of our family, we're going to give you $3 a week. You learn, you pay your tithe with that, and you give some offering, and so on. Have you ever heard of an allowance? My father did not believe in allowance. And that is, you know, you have to work for everything you get. But according to the spirit of prophecy, when children are too young to work outside, they should be given an allowance. So look, it says right here. Whether supplied by their parents, that would be an allowance, or by their own earnings, let boys and girls learn to select and purchase their own clothing, their books, and other necessities, and by keeping an account of their expenses, they will learn as they could learn in no other way the value and use of money. So I'm going to tell you, probably most of you parents have some kind of scrapbook or mementos of your kids when they're little. It might be videos or it might be a scrapbook or whatever. We have a scrapbook of our kids, and one of the things in Melissa's scrapbook is in age third grade. She's 8 years old, in third grade. Kathy has a check that Melissa wrote. Now, believe it or not, when each of our kids got to a certain age, Kathy took them to the bank and they opened a checking account. So Melissa, she's got her checking account. She's in the third grade. Maybe she's 10 years old, because that's when they got their checking accounts. At any rate, most of you remember back when you were in the first grade, you did big printing with big pencils. But when you get to third grade, what do you learn? Cursive. So you make these script letters and, you know, loops and all that stuff. Well, anyway, Melissa's check in the third grade, we were paying our kids an allowance for work they did around the house. So we actually gave them their tuition money plus extra spending money. So each of them wrote the tuition check to the church school treasurer every month. So Melissa is writing this for her school tuition at age 10. And the part of it is printed and part of it's script, because she's just learning to do cursive. That's one of the cute things to remember about Melissa, because at that age she was just learning to do it. So notice here, purchase their own stuff. This, if they do that, keep an account of their own expenses, they will learn as they could learn in no other way the value and the use of money. So how old should kids be? When very young, this is the same page, Child Guidance 136. Children should be educated to read, to write, to understand figures, and what else? Keep their own accounts. When do kids learn to read? About 6, 7 years old, first grade. Should they start keeping an account of their money? Good idea. Maybe just a checking account. What should they be taught? Well, the very best legacy the parents can leave their children is the knowledge of useful labor and the example of a life characterized by disinterested benevolence, helping people who could not help you back. By such a life, they show the true value of money that is only to be appreciated for the good that it will accomplish in 3 things. It's the same 3 things, but in different words. As we saw earlier in Christ Doctrine lessons, relieving their own wants. She talked about the necessities of life before, the necessities of others, and advancing the cause of God. Always 3 things in the spirit of prophecy, over and over. Okay, what parents are with their children, Christian home environment, very interesting. And now they want a willingness to work and appreciation for it. Proverbs, I always like the wise men, so we're back at Proverbs 22. Remember Proverbs 22:6, train up a child. Proverbs 22:7, rich rule over the poor. This one is 22:29. You show me a man who is diligent in his work. And he's not going to stand before mere men. Who will he stand before? Kings. Very interesting. So we're going to look at a good education, and this is important. So now comes the very practical time for parents and young people, because we're going to talk about the value of education. If you do not graduate from high school, but you're willing to work 40 hours a week for the rest of your life, you're going to earn about $1 million. Now that's a lot of money. And someday God's going to say to you, you earned $1 million, what did you do with it? If you graduate high school, you could add $400,000 to that. Some college, another $200,000. Graduate from college, $2.2 million. Professional degree, $4 million. Excuse me, this is for your lifetime earning. And I have to add what I had last time, unless you work for the church. The real interesting part about this is education does pay. So I'm going to show you a couple of points now. Studies show that the majority of college graduates end up working in a field that has nothing to do with the degree they receive. Is this true?
Yes.
Now, the real interesting thing, a wise plan would be for young people to take a battery of aptitude tests to determine their interests and then match them with the field of study for which there will be jobs available. There's an organization that is the successor of Larry McKett's Your Finances in Changing Times and Money Matters that he had, called Crown Ministries. And they have on their website an aptitude test, a self-administered aptitude test, and you look for Career Direct. And when you get to their website, that's what Career Direct looks like. And it's just like you buy a software program at some store, Staples, or someplace like that, Best Buy, whatever. It's in a box, but all that's inside of it is a little CD. So anyway, you get the CD and you load it on your computer. Please understand, this is not a 5-minute quiz. It will take 2 or 3 hours to do it. But when you get done, it will score it for you on your computer. And it will tell you, based on what you just told us, you would be good at this, this, and this. And here's the kind of a major it would take for you to get that kind of a job. And here's the kind of jobs that are available for those kind of people. Would that be interesting to know or not? So I'll just give you an illustration of that. Andrew, when he took it, scored high in humanities. And so it says you should study English and history and those kinds of things. And so Andrew actually got a double major in English and history and went to law school with it, which is perfect. So he didn't waste any degrees or any money. Do you understand? But in addition, Melissa took it and she scored high that way too. You want to know why the kids scored high that way? Kathy read to them from the day they were born. Every day something. Kathy's read hundreds of books to our children. Clear through Childcraft, clear through Little House on the Prairie, through Bible Story, My Bible Friends, every word in all those things. They love books. To this day, if Andrew and Melissa want to give each other a gift, what do they give them? A book. Very interesting. They love books. So Melissa took communications in English, and today she's the associate editor of Liberty Magazine. Do you understand? She didn't waste her time. By the way, if you go through college and take Oriental basket weaving, you may just love that. Where are you going to get a job? Do you understand? And if you get a student loan, you still have to pay it back. True? Yes. Okay, so now we're going to look on, click on resources you can get. It would be worth it. So we understand these are the kinds of things that are typically available if you have a good education. Computer technology, healthcare, business services, social services, and so on. Those are the kinds of things where there are typically jobs available. Now, I've spoken at GYC. You guys understand GYC, Generation Youth for Christ? It's young people, typically college and high school students, get together by the thousands every year during their Christmas break. We do Christmas and New Year's to learn more about the Bible, closer to God, learn how to witness, and so on. So I've been a speaker at these several times. And when I did my seminar in Baltimore for this GYC group, somebody came to me and said, well, I don't know if I want to go to college or not. I said, well, why not? And they said, well, our 2 favorite preachers in the Adventist church did not graduate from college. And most everybody in this room know their names. This is interesting. I said, come to my seminar and you can make a decision after that. So here's the spirit of prophecy, Christ's object lessons, real easy to remember, 3, 3, 3. I'm going to ask you this question first. Do you think God can use anybody who's willing to be used? Yes. Answer is obviously yes. But look at this. If placed under the control of His Spirit, the more thoroughly the intellect is cultivated, the more effectively it can be used in the service of God. The uneducated man who is consecrated to God and who is longs to bless others can be and is used by the Lord in his service. But those who, with the same spirit of consecration, have had the benefit of a thorough education, can do much more extensive work for Christ. They stand on vantage ground. Now it goes on to say something else, the very next paragraph. The Lord desires us to obtain all the education possible with the objective view of imparting our knowledge to others. None can know where or how they may be called to labor or speak for God. Our Heavenly Father alone sees what he can make of men. There are before us possibilities which our feeble faith does not discern. Our minds should be so trained that if necessary we could present the truths of his word before the highest earthly authorities in such a way as to glorify his name. Now before I finish it, I'm going to ask you, what are the highest earthly authorities that you could think of that you could testify to? Kings, yeah. In the United States, maybe testify before the U.S. Supreme Court. Maybe speak before Congress. Maybe have an interview with the president. Do you understand? If you have thorough education, how much better you're going to feel about it. That's important. Okay? We should not slip even one opportunity, not let slip even one opportunity to qualify yourself intellectually to work for God. Now, I'm going to tell you something. This is absolutely true. Suzanne gave you some of my credentials last night of my degrees and all of that. I do not have anything posted on my walls at all. I've never had any of my plaques or graduation certificates or anything up there. I didn't do it for that. I did it so I could qualify myself to speak better for God. Does that make sense? And to honor him and to promote his cause. So that's the point. Now we're going to talk about when to get a student loan. If you have children, grandchildren who are contemplating getting an education, this is really good, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. As a general rule, getting a college degree will enhance your income capacity or capability for the rest of your life. If you don't have the money to finish your education, it might be appropriate to get a student loan, but only after you have considered the following points. And here they are. One, getting a loan is fairly easy. Paying it back with interest is the hard part. So, let me go on, we'll do it. Most government-backed student loans cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. The only way to get out from under the obligation is either to repay the loan or die. Make sure that the education you're funding with a student loan will lead to a job, a better job than you now have with a higher income. That's why it's justified to get a student loan. Then apply for all the grants and scholarships you qualify for because you don't have to pay these back. Parents help with educational costs. Now, I'm going to tell you something interesting. This is not to brag about myself, but when I went to college, my parents did not have the money to help me. So I worked at, the cabinet shop and bakery and all these different things, canvassing in the summer, and I don't regret that I learned all those things. But I just want you to tell you, if the parents can help, they should help. That's what I think. In Bible times, the parents gave their children land for their inheritance so they could make a living farming the land. Most of us are not farmers, so our inheritance should be something that would help us to become independent adults, and that is an education. Very simple. Work and save in the summers, work part-time during the school year. This will help minimize the amount that you have to borrow, if any. The work experience will also be good education to provide much sought-after experience that prospective employers want you to possess. Now, this is the most important one. If after doing all of this, you still need to borrow to finish your degree, don't borrow all you qualify for. Just borrow the very minimum you need to pay your bill. This is important, what I'm telling you now. So you go to Andrews University, and you think, well, I'm going to need some money to get through this quarter. So you go to the student aid office, and they say, well, we can probably help you. Fill out this form, give us your parents' 1040 forms for the last 2 years, give that to them. Then, about 2 weeks later, they text you or send you an email, come by the office, we've got good news for you. So you go by the office and say, great, you can qualify for $10,000 student loan. Guess what most students do? Borrow $10,000, even though they can get through school with $2,500. Do you understand? You have to pay it back with interest. You can't discharge it in bankruptcy. It's only nullified if you die. Do you understand why it's so valuable to just borrow the money to qualify for? Just borrow the very minimum you need to pay your bill. I must tell you something here, because education is valuable, but it's very expensive. When I was at the School of Health at Loma Linda, I was working one day and the gentleman stopped by in a nice Jeep, and he was a medical student. I said, how did you get this Jeep? He says, well, I borrowed more than I needed for my education, so I bought the Jeep. This is incredible. The point I'm trying to make is do it just the minimum amount. Your education is valuable. Student loans have to be paid off with interest, and the less debt you have upon graduation, the quicker you can pay it off and get on to savings for other things like your home mortgage and so on. So in an ideal world, there would be no borrowing and no debt. But since we don't live in an ideal world, there may be times when it's necessary to borrow. Just make sure that you borrow the very minimum you need and then pay it off as quickly as possible to save interest costs. That's the point. Okay, on their own. Simple, start simple, build a good foundation. This is for children again. Plan ahead with a simple budget. And then independence. So I got to tell you guys a story. A lady came to me after one of my seminars. Actually, she didn't talk to me personally. She talked to Kathy, because Kathy's frequently with me. And she said, I see there's a whole bunch of people talking around with your husband, so could I call him at work? Would you mind giving me his phone number? So she gave me my phone number. She said, this lady's going to call you probably on Monday. So she called me. And she said, Reid, I was at your seminar Saturday afternoon, but you were so busy, I just thought I would call you today. I said, well, fine. She said, my daughter has just called me, and they're about to turn the electricity off at her place, and she wants me to help her pay her electric bill. Should I do it? What would you tell her? What I said was, I don't think I have enough information. Is she sick or disabled? Has her husband been hurt in a car wreck? Or laid off work or something? I mean, there's got to be some kind of a problem. And she said to me, I'm glad you guys are sitting down. This is the funniest thing that's ever happened to me, I think. She said to me, oh, she doesn't work. And I said, well, what's the story? Well, she and her friend, another girl, graduated from the academy the year before, and they decided to go out on their own. So they rented this apartment. But to make matters worse, they had 2 pet dogs. And if they leave the dogs at home alone in the apartment, they just tear the place up. You've seen these pictures of the dogs tearing the toilet paper off the roads, tearing up pillows and saying, don't, it wasn't me, those kind of things. Well, anyway, the dogs just tear up the place. So the other girl works. What kind of a job can you get right out of high school? Minimum wage, you understand. And the other one's home with the dogs. And she wants her mother to pay her electric bill. So I said to this lady, are you sitting down? She said, yes. I said, well, here's my answer to you. With those circumstances, it's quite bleak. So what I said was, there's a place in every county in America called the animal shelter. And if the dogs tear up the place, they should be found a new adoption to a farm somewhere where they can enjoy life to the fullest. But they shouldn't keep you from working. And then you tell your daughter, they sell these big long taper candles at Walmart. Get yourself some big peanut butter jar lids or something and get ready to put the candles down in there, whip up a little place. Get ready for candles because the electricity is going out of your house. It works just fine at our place. And if you want to come home and work, go to school, you're welcome. If you want to be on your own, you're on your own. You get the point? That's the deal. So the primary goal of parenting is to train their kids to be independent adults. And that's the important part. Now there's one other thing that's pretty interesting. And this is, Ellen White talked about a self-denial box should be in every house. When you place the Lord first, determine that His house should no longer be dishonored by debt. God will bless you. Every week endeavor to lay aside something for this object, something in addition to your tithe money. Have a box for this purpose. Explain to your children that this is the self-denial box in which you place every dollar and every penny that's not required for actual necessities. It is for the Lord's house to lift the dishonoring debt from the place of worship. In making this offering, every member of the family will receive a blessing. So she made this statement in Child Guidance 132. Children are to be educated to deny themselves. At one time, when I was speaking in Nashville, this is Nashville, Tennessee, the Lord gave me light on this matter and flashed upon me with great force that in every home there should be a self-denial box. That into this box the children should be taught to put their pennies that they would otherwise spend for candy and other unnecessary things. So here's what she said the self-denial box contents should be used for. To help liquidate church debt. Is this just for the rich people? All of us can work together, even the kids. By the way, you have the kids doing that, don't you, with the little children's offering here. Interesting. Help the family stay out of debt, help the needy, help the suffering, help spread the gospel to others. Those are the ways that the self-denial box is used. Now we're going to take a break of 15 minutes. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how to pay off your house and how to get out of debt. You'll find this to be very, very valuable information. And it's, for most people, it's the largest debt that they have, but it can be done much easier than it's typically given you by the banks. So we're going to take a short break, and as soon as we come back, we'll get into this topic. We'll also talk about retirement, inheritance, estate planning, and those kind of things, just quickly. And then, of course, be thinking about your question. Maybe you want to write it down so you know what you're going to say. We'll do some question and answer in the next section. Okay? 15 minutes.